Okay, my name is Andreas Gunawan. And then what? Well, okay, I was born from a family. We were Indonesian citizens, but we were formerly Indonesians, and
Chinese.
yeah, and we have both my parents were of Chinese background, and we don't know exactly how many generations they have been here, but one thing for sure is that both my parents don't even speak Chinese. And compared to the other families, my parents happen to be quite liberal, so they don't really control what I am doing, but they just give me suggestions. And that gave me a lot of freedom. So obviously I don't know what happens to me when I was much too young, because I don't remember that. The only thing I remember is starting just before the Japanese occupation. Now, during the Japanese occupation, we moved from Surabaya to a small city, a little bit more inland, which is Lawang. And we spent there the rest of our lives until after the Japanese occupation, where we moved to Lawang, which is a bigger city. And what I remember is that at that time, we of course did not have school because the schools were closed during the war and so on. And I only remember that my hobby starting at that time when I was about 9 years old. My biggest hobby is mechanical. So I've been fiddling around with repairing anything mechanical. And I do remember that after the Japanese lost, the Dutch wanted to come back, and but the Indonesian people don't want them to. So the Dutch asked the British to come in and have them secure the area. But the Indonesians started fighting, and the thing I remember is that the first arrival of the British were fought back by the Indonesians. So the British never really landed, and that was in the port city of Surabaya. We were in Lawang. At that time, I only knew that that finally the Dutch came anyway, and practically the whole of East Java was occupied by the Dutch, and my father helped fight the Dutch. And that's where I only remember that he always brings me when he was smuggling arms for the Indonesian people. And the arms were bought from Dutch soldiers. That's all I remember, and I knew it because my dad always brings me along during the smuggling, because he always used an old car, the Citroen car, and I was the one that could repair the transmission that always gets loose. So that's why my parents brought me along.
How old were you then?
I think around 9 years old. And it's easier for me because also what happens is that I can just crawl underneath the car and repair it, and nobody would know. And another thing that I remember is also that that car always breaks down, and we didn't have any parts. Actually, the cylinder packing is the one that always break. So I did make new packing from cardboard impregnated with fat, with just grease. But of course it doesn't last long. It lasts only just enough for 1 day driving. And then you have to take the cylinder apart again and put new packing. That's all I remember. And after the war, we moved back to Surabaya. And I followed, and school started, and I followed again. But since I was late because the lack of school in the beginning, so I had to jump classes. So every class in elementary school, I did only basically 3 months to half a year. And depending on my abilities, the teacher would move me to a higher class. And I nearly catch up with my age and the class that I'm supposed to be in. I also remember that our house was used as a temporary hiding place for Indonesian fighters. And our house was just a few blocks away from what they call a meeting hall, like they call in Dutch it's society, sociëteit then. And the only thing I remembered was that one day all those people came out of the house and blew that building up because the Dutch has been using it as a storage for explosives. That's what I experienced about the war. I don't have much friends, first of all because I also use the vacation time. I used to volunteer at factories, and I used to volunteer at the factory where in the company where my father works, and I volunteer looking and repairing equipment that is used there. Among others, equipment to make suitcases, and also equipment to make the leather seals for the pumps in sugar factories. And then they also make shoes. And there I remember once what happened was this, that the company imported shoe machineries from I think Switzerland, but when they arrived, nobody could operate it because some things may be missing. So I volunteered, and the owner approves that I experiment with the machines because it was very difficult to get technicians from abroad. And so I took apart one of those shoe machineries and completely to the smallest screws and then put it back together again. And I don't know what happened, but it starts working. So I don't even know what the mistake was. That's one thing that I remembered among others. But the result is, of course, that I do only have a few friends, but not much. And actually, I'm getting along much better with friends of my father who work at the factory. And sometimes during the vacation time, they teach me a lot that has nothing to do with the factory, but has a lot to do with mechanical knowledge. One other thing very important to remember is this that I got from my parents, is that just after the war, we had very difficult because all the money is gone. We didn't have much money, and actually my parents had only money for just 1 day. But at that time, a friend of my father came and asked for help because his wife was in trouble. It was very ill, and they don't have money to buy medicines. So my father gave all the money to him, so that he can use it for the medicines for his friend's wife. And when everybody was objecting to that, my father said, the wife may not live if we don't help, but we don't know what's happening with us. We may have something else tomorrow. And that gave a real big, that has a real big influence on me. And after everything got settled and things become normal, I went to a Catholic school. And since we were not religious at all, we had at the time a choice between 3 religions, because there were 3 very good schools in the area of Malang. One is Catholic, the other one is Protestant, and the third one is Muslim. And since I was at the time around 13 and just finished elementary school and was supposed to go to junior high. And all those schools were looking for students at that time, so they were contacting my parents. But my parents didn't want to talk about it and asked me to take my own decision. And after comparing all 3 religions, I decided to go to the Catholic school. And after that, all my other siblings followed me, go to the same school. So we went all to the Catholic school, and after junior high school, I was baptized Catholic. And after that, also all my other siblings. Yeah, I was the oldest, and I had 2 younger sisters. No, actually 3. Yeah. After me came a younger sister, and then the second sister was also so the second one was also a sister, so a girl, and the third one was a boy, and the last one was a girl again. Well, frankly, I did not really have a lot of fun, because, well, I did a lot of course, with a friend, but that's all after I finished high school. So before high school, there was not much fun, because of the war and because of the study, because I had to catch up. So only after I finished high school, so entered the university, I had more fun and of course a lot more trouble. At that time, this is a little bit long story. There is only one university in Surabaya, which is the Airlangga State University, but it only has a medical department and then also the dental and law, and I don't like all them. So I went to a private, not really a university, but a private school, especially for only teaching economics. This is like an institute, and it was run by the Dutch. So I went to that institute and learned economics. Now, one reason for that is this. I like mechanical things, and I also like economics. But there is only, at that time, only one technical institute that's in Bandung. But you cannot completely finish it. I think goes up to 3rd grade. And we didn't have money for me to continue if I go there. Since I like economics, I decided to go to the economics department. Well, my uncle, who is the dean at the Erlangga State University for the medical department wants me to take medicine, but I refused. But I do like their lab and workshop. And at that time, actually, I even managed to build a kind of an electrocardiogram for the hospital there, because there were no equipment after the war. And I managed by using a very interestingly, very primitive, buying the radio tubes that I can buy in the second-hand market. And also for the graph, I just used a needle which runs on an emptied can of butter, which I put an axle on, but before we use it, we blackened it with the flame from a candle, and the needle just runs on there, and that's where the doctor reads the electrocardiogram. Well, it doesn't last long, because after a while, I made several actually, and after a while the real equipment came, so I don't know where it came from, maybe donated by some other company, other country, but anyway, mine is not used anymore. But I still refuse to go to the medical department because I don't like the thing. I don't like dealing with sick people. So that's why I went to the economic department. And that's where it gets very interesting, because the first time I went in there was a big fight. Because at this, let's say that's an institute of economics, something like that. There was a student union, and they require everybody to be a member. And I'm just a stubborn guy, so I don't want to become a member. And what they did was that if I don't want to become a member, then they don't want to give me lectures, the copies of lectures which they translated from some books. But I still refused, and there was a big trouble. So I formed another group from students that agrees with me, and instead of taking notes from books and trying to distribute it as something to help the students, because books were very rare at that moment, and I spoke very fluently Dutch. So I decided to translate all the lectures which were done in Dutch by Dutch lecturers, and stenciling it and giving it to people that don't belong to that student union. So finally the student union gave up, and since the stenciled material that I gave was more up to date with what the lecturers are saying, so mine is more popular, and I only gave it to people that don't join that union. So finally the union was dissolved. That's the first fight. And I got a lot of help from the Dutch lecturers at that time, because they like it that I speak Dutch. I'm even allowed to go to their house, where they run a tape, the old-fashioned tape where it's in rolls, and they put the lectures on there in Dutch, and I translated it in Indonesian and stenciled it. So we got the real authentic lectures. Because I had the original lectures, it is easier for me to follow the courses, and but the courses that don't always go smooth, because then there is the political problems, and at a certain point the Dutch lecturers left, and so on. But I think it took me 7 years instead of 5 years to graduate. And that is also caused not only by the troubles with the government there. But because the Dutch lecturers that were at that Department of Economics were from two Dutch universities which don't agree with each other. And one group is from Amsterdam and the other group is from Rotterdam. And the economic theories of those two schools in Holland were contradictory. So during the exam, if you answer according to the theory of Amsterdam, then you always fail from with the lecturer from Rotterdam. So luckily there was what they call a comprehensive exam, which is manual, where you get to be examined, you alone, in front of I think 4 or 5 lecturers and from both universities. So I just play it out between the two groups and told them that these lecturers told me this and this told me that, and I took the middle line, and that's actually the way where I graduated, and I managed to be the first one to graduate from the university. And because of that, when I graduated, there was no graduation from the university, but the graduation was more or less a party organized by the governor of East Java. So actually it's the government that's having a graduation just for me alone, because that year I was the only graduate. And after I graduated, I was more or less forced to work at the university. And there was no choice, because the ceremony of handing me the diploma was also made together with the ceremony of appointing me as a lecturer at the Erlanger University on the Department of Economics. Besides teaching at the university, I need to have another job, because the university doesn't pay enough just for living. I think the salary at that time was just enough for 1 week of living. So I applied for a job at the recommendation of the dean at the time of the Department of Economics at the company that was run by the Dutch, which is Heineken. But I got in trouble with the general manager there, because he was asking me to do accounting, and I didn't like accounting. I wanted to do marketing or anything else in management, but not accounting. And he was mad and wanted to force me to do accounting, and I said no, and he was angry. But and reported back to the Department of Economics, to the dean, that I'm having trouble with him. So I explained to the dean that I didn't want to do the job. And at that time, people that knows a lot of accounting and so on, there are not many. Well, I just passed the exam, but that doesn't mean that I like it. And after 2 years, I think, they made me also the coordinator of the Department of Economics. There was a fight between the communists, well, not a real physical fight, but then it was getting real bad between communists and the non-communists. And at a certain point, the communists want me to keep the university open, but the anti-communists want me to close it. So first the communists kidnapped me and said that I should open it. Okay, so after that they brought me back after I opened it for a few days, And then the non-communists kidnapped me. Actually, if I keep opening the whole thing, they would probably kill me. But there is a mistake that they made, and that is that the people that are kidnapping me were from my former students. So I just talked over with them, and we agreed that they let me go, and I just treat them with soto ayam on the side of the road. So that's what happened. And the funny thing is this, that lately, that's after I moved to the US and I came back to Indonesia, one of the guys that kidnapped me came during the meetings that I had with the alumni and said, "Hey, do you remember me?" I said, "No." "Well, I was one of the guys that kidnapped you." That was the funny thing. You know, the problem is all these people that I met with during this, we could have corroborated all those stories, it would be better, but none of them are alive. Actually, the last one, that guy that kidnapped me, that was the last one, he passed away last year. He invited me to go, he is a Haji, a very fanatic Muslim. He invited me to stay at his home. We became good friends though.
Oh yeah.
I was the coordinator at the university, as you know, and that's where I had big trouble. First of all, because I had trouble with the government, which was leaning left, and they sent lecturers from Yogyakarta, from the Gadjah Mada University, which were leftist. And I didn't like that. And since I was the coordinator, I cooperated with the students and always asked the students to pick the lecturers up from the airport when they arrive, because they just come there and lecture for a few days and go back to Jogja, and another one comes. That's the way it goes. And what I did was this: the ones that are leftists, I always make sure that they come late, because I always organize who picks it up, and I always ask the students to pick it up and tells him that's the one that is picking up, to make sure that the car breaks down or there is a leak in the tire or whatever, so that he always comes late. And of course, after 3 times coming late, I refuse to receive him and tell the Gadjah Mada University, I don't want this guy because he is not disciplined, he is always late. But after a while, I think the Ministry of Education got a little bit fed up with me, and but they didn't dare to throw me out of the university, of my job, because the students were behind me, and they're afraid that there will be demonstrations if they let me go. So they found another way of getting rid of me, and that is because actually immediately after I graduated from the Department of Economics, I applied for a scholarship to go to the US. But that scholarship was refused because at that time, economics people are not supposed to go to a capitalist country to study. So that was refused. But they use it as an excuse when they want to get me out, and that's by asking me to come to Jakarta to talk. And when I talked to the minister, they just gave me a passport and said, you asked for a scholarship. Well, you got it, you just go. And of course I refused, because I have not even said anything to my parents, and nobody knows. I cannot just go to Jakarta and then not coming back and just go. So I devised a trick, because I knew the dean of the Department of Economics very well at that time. And I told the minister that I cannot go because I have not corrected an exam that I took, and the students may get mad. And of course he doesn't believe it, so I asked him to phone the dean at the time, who knows me very well, and he immediately understands that I didn't want to go. And he told the minister that I cannot go because I have to correct that first. when the minister said that he had to correct the whole thing, he refused. He said he cannot do it because he is a lawyer, not an economist. So finally the minister agreed for me to get back home for 2 weeks. But of course I stayed for more than a month. But then they picked me up with people from the Navy. Of course I had to go. So that's how I ended up at Yale University, and then after that moves to Ohio State, because the professor with whom I followed at Yale University moved to Ohio State. I arrived in the U.S. and then I forgot where I arrived. I think it was in L.A., but then they sent me over to Yale University, and at Yale University I arrived exactly on August 17th, with the Indonesian Independence Day. And it was customary at Yale University that during Independence Day the International Students Office hoists the flag of that country. And there were quite a few Malaysian students there. And at that time, Indonesia had political trouble with Malaysia. They took the flag down and trampled it. And of course, I got very mad. So I went to the office and I saw that the Malaysian flag was also displayed inside the office, but inside a locked glass. Was that the
Cabinet.
Cabinet, yeah. So I was so mad, I broke the glass, took the Malaysian flag, tear it apart, and also trampled it. So the Malaysian students were so mad. I think there were 5 or 6, and wanted to beat me up. Of course, I cannot fight alone against them, because there were no Indonesian students at that time at Yale. So what I did, I went behind the counter and used a chair to defend myself until the police arrived. I don't exactly know what happened, but the police just asked questions and they let me go, but they took some of the Malaysian students there. But there was another incident that happens. After that, I think some organizations at the university, and also it was a news organization, I think, asked me whether I was willing to debate about the Malaysian and Indonesian problem. Well, I didn't know too much, and but there are a lot of Malaysians there, and quite a few are graduates and really, let's say, very proficient in politics. So at that time I phoned the Indonesian embassy and told them what problem I have. And the Indonesian embassy was very good in assisting me by sending one of their scholars to me to train me for the debate for about a week. Actually, during that week, I didn't even follow lectures at the university, but just followed the instructions of this guy to how to debate all those things. And he also brought a lot of brochures that I could distribute during the debate. Of course, with all that information, I'm doing very well during the debate. And I started distributing the leaflets, and that's where I got in trouble with the police, with the campus police, because I'm not supposed to distribute political pamphlets at the university. But anyway, everything turns out okay. They let me go. I was there only 1.5 years, I think, so there's not much. Well, I listened with some friends of mine, American students, asked me to go to some open air concerts. So I did look several, and mostly it was folk music, and with some political background. And I followed one very interesting thing was also this. I followed some Malaysian students, which are friends of mine, when they were attending a rally from the Ku Klux Klan. They had some friends which belonged to that group, and they invited us to go to listen there. Now, and I was supposed to act as a Malaysian student, but luckily nobody asked us anything. I just saw them burning the cross and all those wounded people and talking all kinds of things, which I at that moment did not really fully understand, except that they are just what you call now supremacists, white supremacists. That's what I understand. But nothing happened. Because after that, it became, there's going to be a revolution in Indonesia. So I got a note, in code of course, from my friends in Surabaya, that they expect the communists to try to take over the country in December. But there was a miscalculation, because before that, so I decided I want to go back, even though I have not finished my PhD there. Yeah. So because we were quite fanatic there that we don't want the country to become communist, so I flew back. But we had a lot of time because they expected it in December, and I went home, I think it was in July. But because of the time, and there was a loophole in the tickets, in the flying tickets for the airplanes, I make use of the loophole and flew to all kinds of national parks. Because in the back, in small letters in the back of the ticket, it is said, as you fly, as long as you go in the same direction, you can stop anywhere. Even if our company doesn't fly there, we will give you another company to fly you there. So that's where I went to Yellowstone, Grand Teton, among others, before I go to Indonesia. And then when I came home, we started discussing about what we think will happen, of course. But we made a wrong calculation, and they start in 30th of September. Well, after that, of course, we didn't do much. Actually, I didn't do much because there was a lot of fighting, and I couldn't do much. And only after the fighting, I went back to the university and worked for the university. And that's why one day I got the assignment to pick up a car for the Department of Economics from the Minister of Education in Jakarta. And on the way back, that's where I got another adventure. That's where there was a hold up by communists on the road, and instead of stopping and getting killed, I decided to ram the roadblock and run away. Yeah, when we rammed the roadblock, it hit the radiator, and the radiator started leaking. But luckily, we found a secluded dirt road, and on that dirt road, a little bit far away from where those people were that were trying to hold us up, there was a small creek, and we filled it water from the creek. And the leak, we just patched the leak with soap, because at that time there were no good hotels, so we always travel having towels and soap and everything. That's basically what happened. So we arrived quite okay at home. after that, I tried to go on my own and started buying a small factory that was not running well to make bicycle tires. But because I don't have experience and all those things, and the factory was in another city in Pasuruan, and I live in Surabaya, it didn't go well and went bankrupt. That's the first one. And then after that, I started working at a conglomerate, which is, I think, 2 match factories, and then a textile factory, and also afterwards a plastic factory. So I started working there, and at the match factory, where I had a lot of fun, because you see, this company is a big company and has selling the majority of matches in Indonesia with a brand. I think the brand was Bear, but it got a lot of competition from a Chinese brand that came in, that was smuggled in the country through the Navy. So it uses Navy ships to bring the product in, and it's very cheap, so we couldn't compete. So the director of that company asked me what I can do about it. So I said, well, can I experiment? So he said, yeah, and you can get anything you want as long as you make sure that they cannot sell. So I asked for a leave of 3 months, where I went to all the dealers of this company all over Indonesia and find out how things are going. And after that, I came back and told him, okay, but I need money to compete with them. So he said, okay, but what do you want to do it? I said, it's a very strange thing. It's not really, it doesn't belong to the marketing theory, but it's a very abnormal, let's say, thing that I want to do. He said, oh, I explained to him, and he said, okay, I can get any money I want. So what I did was this, told all the dealers that are located in harbor cities, and where they used to import the Chinese matches. And I told all the dealers, whenever it arrives, buy it up. Not 100%, but let's say 80% or so, buy it up and store it. And we give you the money to buy it up. And they were, of course, asking what to do with it. Don't do anything, just keep it in your warehouse. So that's what happened. And it happened, I think, until three or 4 shipments of those matches came in, which took, I think, about 4 months or something. And at that time I said, okay, now wait until it arrives again. By the time it arrives, sell all your stock at half the price of what you bought for. And that it's on our loss because we pay you anyway. So that's what happened. So finally nobody wants to import or buy the Chinese thing again. And that's how we got rid of the imported Chinese matches. And after that, everything was running smooth, so I got a little bit bored. So instead of getting bored, he told me that the boss, told me that his stepson has started a factory to manufacture PVC bottles, but now it's not selling. Why didn't you take care of it? So he transferred me to that company, and I took it over. So basically, I took over the marketing, and that's a long story, but in short, I was able to take over the market with, of course, a lot of doing strange things and all kinds of setbacks. And at that moment, that was the first PVC bottle manufacturing company in the country. And the first customer was, I think, at that time, that was Unilever. But they refused to talk to me at that time because his stepson has been there and messed up the whole thing. So when I first took it over, I wanted to talk to the general manager of Unilever there. He doesn't even want to receive me. So I asked the boss again if I can get money to break the thing. So he said, okay. So I got a lot of money at that time, and I put it in an envelope with a check. It was in check form, of course. And I went back to the company and told the secretary, if your boss wants to receive me only for 10 or 15 minutes and does not buy my product, he can keep the check. And when I came in front of him, I just, before I went there, I bought a bottle of shampoo that the company bought. That was, I think, V07 from Unilever. And then I emptied the contents. And when I talked to the boss just put on looks at his watch and said, okay, you got 15 minutes to talk. So I didn't say much. I took out the bottle from my business case and showed him, this is your bottle. If you show me your invoice for how much you bought this, I'm selling you at any quantity you want at a 10% less than what is on this thing. So he accepted that, showed me the thing, and I promised it. But he added a clause that if I don't deliver, I will be fined 10% for every day. So within 10 days, the whole money is gone, and I have to pay the fine. But what happened was this, not 10 days, but I think that was 1 month. Anyway, it adds up. I get a fine that for every day that I'm delayed in the delivery. But what happens was this. As soon as I get back and wanted to manufacture, it turns out that the machinery that was imported was broken. And that was a German machine. And to import the broken part, Germany can only deliver it in 3 months, which is of course too late. And then plus you need to bring somebody to install it and the transport and so on. So luckily, the boss of the company that I work for has an advisor that works for a formerly Dutch company, which is Boma Bisma Indra. It's called. It was taken over by the government, and it is called Boma Bisma Indra. And he's an engineer, and he was introduced to me, and that guy helped me a lot, because I said we cannot order the part, so we have to make it. I said, how do you want to make it? Well, you have to copy it. I said, we cannot do it. I said, we give you the parts, the broken part, and you just copy the whole thing, exactly the same. And but said, we cannot do it. You have to instruct them to do and then try it out. Okay, so that guy decided to bring all the machining tools, like lathes and those machines that make the gears and so on, to the factory on 3 trucks. And I just connected the 3 trucks to in the factory, and he brought his people also, and his people manufactured it, and I just look at it and try it out every time. And that's how I got the product delivered.
So you didn't get fined at all?
No. Actually, I got extra orders. And then, of course, after that is finished, there's no... that's the problem with me. I lost interest. And then a friend of my boss has another company, which is a pharmaceutical company, which is going bankrupt. And he asked my boss if he can borrow me. And my boss said, well, he just got a scholarship to study in Germany, so you have to persuade him. He's leaving us anyway. So that guy came and persuaded me if I'm willing to take over his company as basically the CEO. And then I went forget about that scholarship. And it was so inviting, so I took that job. And because I got the references from the university also, I got credit from the bank there. And at that time it was easier because the bank doesn't have that much regulations, and I don't even have any collateral. But there was a bank, the name is Bank Buana, and that bank, the director of the Surabaya branch, he said, okay, he wants to give it to me, the credit, to run that company, as long as it's on my name, not on the name of the company. He doesn't trust the company. So I took it, and with that money, I paid off half of the labor, so I can, because there is a law in Indonesia, if you fire somebody, you have to pay a kind of a severance money, and the company doesn't have severance money, so I used part of the money to pay the severance, and the other half, and I said those who was willing to stay has to promise to be willing to work for me, if necessary, 24 hours, and half of them decided to pay to stay, and the other half took the severance money. And then after I know who was staying, I told the one that's staying, okay, I increase your salary. Actually, I double your salary. But you have to follow all my instructions. And then it becomes okay, and I think after 2 years, I started making profit. But then the owner of that company started playing at a casino. So basically I quit. Anyway, after that I started another company that is to manufacture the anti-tubes for toothpaste with a license from Britain. But it went bad because one of the financier was I think it's an uncle of one of the government bank directors, and he was not really playing fair. So I lost that company. He bought out my shares, and I started another company to manufacture parts for Singer sewing machines. But that company had to be scrapped because the partner, who was a director of one, or the brother and officially, from one other government bank, just died. So that was not his mistake. So I didn't have the money to continue. So that was bad. And then it starts with the last company. That's the abrasive company. And that's the one that goes until the end. Well, it is quite long though, the story. It did not start with that. I started working for another company again, because that company wanted to survey the market of abrasives, not of abrasives, actually of cooking oil. So I was just doing the job, doing a survey. And during that survey, I found out that all sandpaper, at the time I knew sandpaper is only those sheets, were imported from China. And I thought it was a simple thing. So I thought, let's manufacture that. So I collected some people that had money. And we started a company to, well, not yet started. We started surveying a company to manufacture that. But that's where I found out that sandpaper is not only that sheet, but it's a lot of other things like endless belts for belt sanders or for disc sanders, flap disc, and things like that, and white belts. And we cannot do that without any know-how. So we started contacting the companies in the US, and the biggest one in the US was Norton. We started contacting Norton, but they didn't even answer. So I asked the consulate to help, and when the consulate contacted them, even then they didn't answer. But I'm a stubborn guy, so we said, let's go to Europe. So we went to Germany and Italy and so on, and found a company that was not doing so well in Italy. And we came together and we agreed on a tentative agreement. So that means that it's an agreement that we will investigate on further, and we are not 100% sure that we want to go ahead. So when I'm back in Surabaya, I sent a copy of that agreement to Norton Company in the US, and just give them a note: you either work with us or I go with this company and I close the market in Indonesia. That's when Norton Company came and agreed to have a license agreement with us. I was in charge of building the factory, and that was when I used the knowledge from the Department of Economics that I had to use what we there call at that time a network planning, but for engineering, not network planning like what you do now, but network planning for engineering. And that's basically this. I think in the manufacturing you call it now like just in time. And that's this. The factory consisted of a lot of machineries, one of which is a real big oven which is 80 meters long. But everything has to be transported there in, I think, about 20 containers, shipping containers. But normally what happens is those containers arrive and you start building. No, I did not do that. I selected the machines that I want to be delivered first. And the following cannot be delivered because I give them the agreement. So we arranged that when the second, let's say the second or third container comes, the early one is already installed. So everything, it doesn't lay idle at our place. So I have a lot of space and I can have it installed, and I installed it with those young graduates from the vocational school. They were electricians, mechanicals, and so on. And everything went real well. And that's where I built the factory in very short time. The normal time is about, I think, 14 or 15 months to build that factory. I mean worldwide. I built it in 9 months. And after that, Norton Company was a little bit afraid that we will become competitors instead of license agreement. So they decided to join. But when we started this Norton Company, of course the name at that time was not Norton Company, it was Hamplas Indonesia, something like that. I also started, I was more or less the founder of the Department of Economics at the Widya Mandala Catholic University. So I was the first dean at the Widya Mandala Catholic University. And now before I quit, actually they also appointed me as the assistant dean for educational matters. And there was one adventure that was very interesting. It was this. That was when with the start of the anti-Chinese thing, yeah, the discrimination, and the ministry gave us an instruction that we can accept only 10% of non-indigenous students. So that means of Chinese background, only 10%. But the wording was not like that. The wording was more or less, it says you accept 10% of people from Chinese background. So I made use of that and interpreted it as a complete instruction. So what I accepted exactly 10% of Chinese people, even though their figures were lower than the indigenous people. Because, well, at that time already the Chinese were a little bit getting lazy, and so, and they were not performing really well as before, because the Chinese were getting prosperous and have cars and things like that, and started playing around, and their grades were not that good. So it becomes the same like the indigenous, so-called indigenous people. And the thing is this, but the percentage of Chinese compared to indigenous people is only 2%. So if I follow according to the grades and they are all the same, that means I get only 2% of Chinese. So I took a different interpretation of the rule, and that is that I accept 10% even though their grades are lower than the so-called indigenous students. And of course the ministry got mad and said, and I thought, well, you told me to do it. So that was my last adventure there at Erlangga University. But then the company also went bankrupt because we had some engineers that do the, and I was supposed to do the marketing, but I could not market anything because the company cannot produce. And the guy, the engineer that was supposed to get the technology transfer, he got the transfer but could not manufacture. But the third time I was kidnapped, not because of the university, but because of the business side. When the company went bankrupt, there was a lot of between shareholders, and but because I signed the agreement with the bank for the material, and so the other party wanted to take the material because the company went bankrupt and want to sell it on the open market, and they brought the police to do that. So I brought in the Navy because I had connections with the Navy. So the Navy sent their trucks and brought products to Jakarta, brought it to the bank. That was when I was kidnapped. But then there was Oma that got me out because Oma was angry and went to the I think the chief of the army in Surabaya, and a man named General Sumitro, very well known there. And Oma doesn't know him, but he went there, and she went there and explained the situation, and that he should tell the police to take his hands off me because I was running away to Jakarta, and Oma was in Surabaya. Oma was angry, and but the general said that we don't want to have anything to do with that. That's not our business. Then Oma started telling that general, if you don't do anything, then I'll go to the students at Erlangga and Vidya Mandala and have them demonstrate. So he phoned the police, and the police didn't dare to do anything and let me go. Yeah, I think in 2 or 3 years, I looked for other partners, and then they agreed. So we refurbished the company because the company was at the time taken over by the bank. And we went to the bank, and the bank said, okay, you take over. And I contacted again Norton Company if he wants to do it. Of course, they didn't want it after that first experience. So, but we already got the written transfer of know-how. from Northern Company. So, but the machinery was in bad shape because it has been laying idle for about 2 or 3 years, and all the cables were eaten by rats and things like that. So I collected about 10 to 15 young graduates from the technical, not high school actually, it's a school that's specialized in
A vocational school?
a vocational school, yeah. So it's in the level of high school actually. And with those guys, I just told them, let's tear everything apart. We took everything apart, replaced all the cables, and after I think about half a year, we started manufacturing again. And we did not really manufacture in big quantities, but after the first product came out, I sent some of the products to Northern Company and said, okay, we have been able to do this. Now you're coming back, and they decided to come back. But we did really well. But after 2 years, Northern Company got taken over by the French. And the management style of the French is really against my conscience. So I decided to quit. But because of the contract, I cannot quit unless I want to pay a very big fine. So I just didn't do anything, stayed, and until after 1 year, I think, well, they sent from French people to go there, but I was always having trouble with the French guy. And after 1 year, they removed the French guy and got an American to come there, and I agreed with that American that I can resign and not get the penalty, provided that I stay advising them for the next 3 years. And also during the next 3 years, no, not 3 years, for 1 year, yeah. But during the next 3 years, I'm not supposed to work for any abrasive companies in the world. And that's it. So then I quit after that. Oh, when I met Oma, that was before I went to the States. That was with we had a lot of trouble with the communists, and Oma was at the time the chairwoman then of the Catholic Student Union at the Catholic University, Vidya Mandala. And I was at the time, because I already graduated at the time, I was at the time the chairman of the Union of Catholic Graduates. They call it ISKA, Ikatan Sarjana Katolik. And we cooperated, so that's where I met Oma. Well, I got to know her better, but before that, I met Oma the first time is when, after I graduated, I went to this Vidya Mandala University, and she was there and she congratulated me. That's the first time we met. Well, she participated when we were after that, yeah, after I met her. We sometimes have meetings to discuss what we do against the communists, and we usually have our meetings in a city named Madiun. Now, the reason for that is that Madiun is the hub of the communist movements, and they would not expect us to have meetings there. So I used to go with Oma there and meet the others, and we had to, in fact, we got also some training from a priest on how to survive in the wilderness. That's because at that meeting, it was decided in case the communists win, we have to stay alive, so we have to run away. And the only way to do it is run in the woods. So there were some basic things that the priest told us about it. Well, I was married when I was 30th. When I was 30, and I think the first was Margie. So that's when I was 31st. And the second was Mary, your mother, and then Uncle Andre. actually everything is quite normal, and at school, Auntie Margie and your mother was doing really well. Uncle Andre was not doing well. Well, he knows everything, but he is not interested in doing things what the school is expected him to do. So he has the worst report card in the whole class. He's always the first or the second, but not from the top, but from below. So Margie doesn't want to pick up his report card. Oma doesn't want to pick up a card. And Mary doesn't want. Well, finally, Oma has to pick it up, of course, because it was an embarrassing thing to receive the report card. It's from the lowest from below. One I think about the kids, there is only one thing that is interesting. We teach them all to be always honest, okay? But at school there is a Girl Scout, and at the certain I forgot exactly what year, but anyway, when they were both at school, both were in Girl Scout. But one of them, now I forgot which one, was supposed to participate in a regional competition, but her age was 1 year too young to participate in that class. But then, because she is the best at school, at her group, so the teacher wants her to tell them that her age is 1 year older, but she refused. And because we told them always to be honest. So the teacher came to her house and complained about it. But we told the teacher, sorry, but that's not the way to do it, because we get trouble in the education if they have to cheat for something like that. So the teacher was a little bit angry, but anyway, okay, there's not much they can do, so they don't participate. But because of that, actually both of them resigned from the Girl Scout. Now, you can ask Mama, maybe she remembers it, I don't know. That's the only thing I think. And then another thing is this: when Auntie Margie graduates from high school and wants to go to the university, she actually wanted to go to astronomy. But there is only one that is in Bandung. And she had the best grades in class. But she was refused. It was refused because she was a woman. And they think the government loses too much, because usually in astronomy, the cost is very high to educate. But if it's a woman, after that they don't work for the government. So they don't want to accept women. So that's when the people at the consulate suggested, why don't she go to the US? But she never went abroad, so we asked Auntie Margie, do you want to go on your own? And she said yes. So she went alone here, and there was Auntie Mary Mele was picking her up. And then the rest is not, I think you already know. She studies English first and then continues, and then the rest follows. But all of them, including Uncle Andre, when we went in the States, have very good grades. Actually, Uncle Andre has two degrees for computer engineering and electronic engineering. So he got 2 diplomas. And then Auntie Margie got her PhD in, I think in Connecticut, University of Connecticut, and worked at several companies until finally she was, until now, employed at General Dynamics, but the electric boat division. And I think you know about Uncle Mary. That's about it, I think. The only thing is about the children is one thing we told them is when you study or work, don't anticipate about the income that you will get. Because by the time you graduate, situation may be different. So what you have to do is take where you are the best and the field that you are the best in. And that must be the one that you like. And that's because in economics I learned there is one law. I don't know who invented that law. And it says there is a rule of 80-20. And that says that in every field, 80% of the total income of that field is enjoyed by only 20% of the members of that field. So if you want to, if you are not the best, you cannot be in that 20%. And to be the best, you have to do what you like. And forget about the education, and after you graduate, forget the technical things that you have got in your education, because that all is going to change anyway. But what you need to know is the way of thinking that you can apply even if there are new developments. So that's the only thing that we follow, and so far it runs well. That's about it.